Big box stores, 4 walls surrounding tens of thousands of square feet of the things we love to buy. However, recent court decisions in Michigan have pitted these retailers against local governments in a legal battle over taxes. The communities feel betrayed as the big box retailers take what is legally theirs. Welcome to Boxed In. The controversy began in 2010 when the Michigan Tax Tribunal ruled this Target store in Novi should be valued as if it were out of business or a dark store. 6 years later, it is still open, but the precedent established in Target v. Novi has allowed hundreds of big box stores in Michigan to significantly lower their property taxes using what has become known as the dark store theory.
This theory extends far broader than dark stores. It extends to factories, extends to residences. It's a theory that you can only value property for property tax purposes by reference to vacant properties. With dark stores, I think it got a lot of traction when we had a Great Recession. And all of a sudden you had vacant stores.
However, the application of this theory in areas with stable economies does not make sense to many local officials.
I know they just held their grand opening, their ribbon cutting. I know they just opened. I know you ran infrastructure there. I know you've got your police department already responding to the retail fraud complaints that are pouring in. I understand that there's traffic congestion. I understand that you have to deliver other government services, but you need to tax that as if it's still vacant land, because that wouldn't be fair to these poor big box corporate entities. Come on.
Limita is the superintendent in Grand Blanc Township and served as the supervisor in Marquette Township when retailers began filing for lower taxes.
You take a Lowe's in Marquette Township that costs $10 million with land and improvements, and the Michigan Tax Tribunal rules that it's worth $3 million, you're basically saying that it's the same value as the dirt that it was built on. That's a tough one to swallow.
In the case of this Costco in Kalamazoo County, the value of dirt wasn't low enough. According to county records, Costco paid $5.5 million just for the land the store now occupies. And after it spent an additional $12 million to build a new store and parking lot, Costco appealed to the tax tribunal to have its true cash value lowered to $4 million. When the township of Oshtemo presented a legal challenge, Costco withdrew its appeal and settled for a true cash value of $8.75 million. Despite the objections from local units of government, the chief judge of the Michigan Tax Tribunal says he and his colleagues are simply following the law.
Nobody's got a bias. Nobody's been told what to do. There's been some discussion I've seen about that, some chair told everybody they had to write a certain way. That's never been the case as long as I've been involved in the tribunal. We look at each individual case and we try and apply whatever we get out of that case to the law.
Lasher, who used to represent local governments before the tribunal, says the reason property owners are winning is simply because they can afford a better legal team.
The real issue here is the inability of townships or municipalities to financially defend the assessments. And that's the real issue. There's a real inequity in the way the financing of appeal defense really occurs.
Legally lopsided or not, former Tax Tribunal Chief Judge Jack Vancouvering feels the dark store theory has pushed the current tribunal too far from traditional assessment policy.
We are in the land of entire hypotheticals where vacant property from almost anywhere is now the measuring stick for value in Michigan.
The hypotheticals Vancouvering is referring to are based on the premise that big box stores are built to suit and not meant to be sold or leased. Following this logic, the assessed value must be based on the assumption that the big box will be of no value to any other retailer if the owner of the store decides to sell it. But Vancouvering is quick to point out that the issue of functional obsolescence was already settled in Meyer v. Midland in 2005 when he was the chief judge at the tax tribunal.
The bulk of the store, the big box, the curbing, the sidewalks, the pavement, the utility, water, sewer, all of that was completely suitable to the market and had a market value. So I look at that as an aspect of how to value any store.
Julie Brixey is the treasurer for Meridian Township near East Lansing and says this Home Depot has been right at home in an old Myers Source Club store since 1997.
It was a very good reuse of a perfectly good building for Meridian Township. But then ironically, Home Depot came in and said, oh, we can't possibly resell this, when that's how they're there. They're there in exactly that type of a reuse of a building. Of course you can reuse these buildings. There's no reason why you can't reuse them. It's just completely manufactured and a made-up argument.
Home Depot would later go on to have the true cash value for the Meridian Township store reduced to $4.6 million. They paid $6.3 million for the store in 1997. In certain circumstances, Brixey agrees with the dark store theory.
In some communities, they probably don't sell because there probably isn't a market there, you know. And so then after the store is gone and it's not selling, well then that's evidence that it should have a lower tax rate. But when it's open and it has thousands and thousands of customers coming in every single day, to be comparing it to a dark store is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
The Michigan Chamber of Commerce feels these appeals and rulings are justified.
A number of businesses in Michigan believed they were overassessed on their real property taxes. So, like any taxpayer, they have the right to challenge those. They legitimately challenge those, and the Michigan Tax Tribunal has, by and large, sided with those taxpayers and said, yes, indeed, you were overassessed. Anyone that feels they've been overassessed should challenge those. The courts may or may not side with them, but no taxpayer in Michigan, whether it's a business, a large or small, or a homeowner, or an industrial taxpayer manufacturing, should be expected to pay more than what is uniformly required in Michigan.
According to a survey conducted by the Michigan Association of County Treasurers, local governments have already returned an estimated $200 million back to businesses through dark store appeals. And with Proposal A capping the annual increase in taxable value to the rate of inflation, local governments will lose hundreds of millions more in the years to come. And that is of great concern to Marquette Township Manager Randy Gerard.
If this continues and we have more and more and more businesses taking advantage of this loophole, if it's not stopped, if it's not plugged, if the taxation issue isn't resolved in the state, we will, in the not too distant future, within 2 to 3 years, not be able to maintain our infrastructure. And that is not in anybody's best interest.
Services have already been scaled back in Marquette County with the closing of the youth home for troubled young people. And the public library has cut back on hours and staff.
I don't think that right now what people see at the library is sustainable, not with all of these challenges to its funding. And that's very sad for me, because in 24 years we did a lot. We won a national award. We were one of the best libraries in the country, and now it's just on a downward spiral. There's no way it's going to be the library in 5 years that people saw 5 years ago.
While smaller communities like Marquette have been hit especially hard by dark store decisions, a spokesperson from the Michigan Retailers Association says local governments have the ability to solve the funding problem.
If the property tax system is not providing the amount of revenue, local community could impose an income tax, as many local communities have. You know, there are other ways to fund it, but I don't think you can, you know, pin the inability of a community to provide the types of services that it wants or that it needs to provide, you know, strictly on the backs of one part of the property tax system.
But a citizens group in Marquette County feels increasing taxes on residents is simply shifting the tax burden.
If these corporations aren't paying their fair share, then other people are making up the difference. The residents of the communities, the working people of the communities, are assuming a greater responsibility than they should. These are big retailers. These are multi-billion-dollar corporations when you look at their annual revenues. And they have a responsibility to be good corporate citizens.
Public schools will likely not see major reductions right away due to the State School Aid Act that requires the state of Michigan to hold schools harmless if their revenues are affected by a tax judgment like the dark store rulings. However, Marquette Area Public School Superintendent Bill Saunders wonders how long the state will be able to afford these reimbursements.
As I travel downstate and familiar with a lot of the larger communities, we're pretty small. We're just a little blip on the radar. And to talk the amount of money that we're talking and the devastation that has on a community our size, and now you start to blow that up, and we start to look at you know, the suburbs around Detroit or the Grand Rapids area or the Lansing area and start to look at the larger communities, it certainly could set education back decades.
In the wake of declining revenue streams from dark store decisions, over 150 businesses in Marquette and more in the city of Escanaba have signed on to what is called the Bright Stores Initiative. According to the director of the Marquette Chamber of Commerce, Jason Schneider, Bright Store owners have made a pledge not to use the dark store theory for reducing their taxes.
A lot of our members are really concerned about it gutting the local and municipal governments. The streets, the fire service, the police protection, all of that is funded by local tax dollars, and most businesses are comfortable paying their fair share, hence the Bright Store Initiative.
Basically, it's an issue of fairness. You know, here we are hardworking folks. We support our local community, homegrown, small business, you know, been here, the business 70 years. My brother and I, my brother's worked here 40 years. I've been here over 20 years, and you know, we're paying our fair share. Why shouldn't everybody? I mean, it's basically as simple as that. You know, they're exploiting a loophole in the system, and it seems to me it would be relatively easy to fix that. It's kind of a no-brainer to me.
Are people going to shop our store because of it? No, probably not. I hope they would, but we didn't do it because we thought that would gain an edge. People shop our store because of who we are, not necessarily what we are. That's just a bonus.
Nobody's going to tell me that because I'm loyal to you guys. So it doesn't.
We have plenty of businesses across the state and the Michigan Chamber who believe, I think this is the right amount of taxes. That doesn't mean that those large retailers agree. I guess to us, that's really nice, that's great, good for them, but that is unfortunate that they, I think, are insinuating that other taxpayers who do believe they've been overassessed shouldn't challenge them.
But Bright Store owners and local officials say they are not pointing fingers at the big box stores.
I'm not angry at big box stores for doing it, not at all. They are not doing anything illegal. They're playing by the rules that are set in front of them.
It's not the fault of the businesses, and we don't blame them. We blame the legislature for not stepping up and taking the action they needed to take.
When the dark store theory was introduced in Indiana, the state legislature took action within 5 months and voted unanimously to ensure the theory would not take hold. In Michigan, it has been 6 years since the first dark store case. State Representative John Keevala and State Senator Tom Casperson introduced legislation in 2015, and the first hearings on the dark store issue took place last December, featuring passionate testimony from Mayor Tom Lowry of Three Rivers.
By state law, the commercial taxable value of a city must remain the same. So if you decrease it for one group of commercial properties, then everyone else has to pay more. That's unfair also. I, as a small retail shop, have to pay a higher level of taxes in order to support my competitor, and that's really unfair.
2 examples of a petition to Board of Review.
Among those testifying was State Representative Dan Lowers, who spoke on behalf of his brother, who is a supervisor in Muzzy Township in St. Clair County. Lowers said all was fine until a law firm made a deal a local business could not refuse.
And you'll see in both cases in 2011, the township had the property assessed at 1.2. The owner said it was worth 1.7 and signed it as such. And in 2011, they had it assessed at 1.1, and the owner said, well, it's really worth 1.5, and signed it as such. And then a firm comes along and says, hey, I can save you a lot of money if you let me keep a third of that money the first year. I'll get your taxes reduced, and you keep the benefits of that from here on out. What's the owner got to lose? He says, sure, do it.
In his testimony before the Tax Policy Committee, former Michigan Tax Tribunal Chief Judge Jack Vancouvering highlighted the disparities between Michigan and neighboring states.
Michigan is an outlier. There is no state that values property like we do now. We value Home Depots in the state at $22 per square foot. In their home state of Georgia, they're valued at over $100. We value Lowe's in the state now at $23 a square foot. In their home state of North Carolina, they're valued at $79 per square foot. We value Menards and Targets in this state at $24 a square foot. In Menards' home state of Wisconsin, they're valued at $61 a square foot.
Documents obtained from recent sales show that Lowe's sold stores in Beaufort, Georgia and Clarksville, Tennessee for around $100 per square foot, and Lowe's bought a store in Nashville, Tennessee from a developer for $93 per square foot in 2010. In his 21-page article about the dark store theory, Alabama attorney Ken Webb points out that lawyers in Florida and Iowa had statutory language to help them defend local governments. However, he notes, Lowe's found Michigan law very welcoming to its dark store challenges. He also writes, Michigan requires nothing short of a legislative fix. One part of that legislative fix came on June 8th. After years of inaction, the Michigan House of Representatives voted 97-11 in support of a bill requiring the tax tribunal to use all available methods when determining the true cash value of property.
There are 97 aye votes and 11 nay votes.
A majority of the members elected and serving having voted therefore, the bill is passed. Chair recognizes.
Chairman of the Tax Policy Committee, Jeff Farrington, addressed his colleagues prior to the vote.
Decisions made by the Michigan Tax Tribunal have had a devastating effect on the resources of our local communities. In my time here, I haven't found any tax loopholes other than this one, let alone try to close it. That all changes today. House Bill 5578 truly addresses the closing of a dangerous loophole that, if not stopped, could affect many other properties and ruin the balance and effectiveness of our overall tax system.
The bill's author, Representative David Maturin, also addressed House members before the vote. If Maturin's bill becomes law, he hopes it will restore appraisal methods used prior to the tax tribunal's adoption of the dark store theory.
I think the tribunal the last 6-8 years or so has taken a different path than what they had in the past, a different path than what most states take when they're adjudicating assessment appeals. Again, I've been in the assessing business, working for the Treasury Department, but I've also been a fee appraiser now for the last 30 years, and I would just like to see good, sound appraisal principles, good, sound, highest and best use analysis for both the comparables and the subject property to make sure the comparables are truly comparable. That's why we call them comps, because they're comparable. And right now, I don't think that that what is being used for comparison is actually the same type of property.
Maturin says his bill will also offer specific guidance to the courts on deed restrictions.
The deed restrictions are huge, and to simply say, well, the assessors didn't make a good enough case, when the cases I've looked at least they've put forth information, that says, hey, the comps the other side is using, they got all these restrictions on them, and then for the tribunal to kind of say, well, they really don't matter, or the case, they didn't make a good enough case, so we're not going to pay any attention to those restrictions. I think is something that the tax tribunal should be doing. I mean, they're a valuation court. They're not just a normal court, they're a valuation court. And I think that, in my opinion, they've got an obligation to look at sound appraisal principles, and if they see something that should not be used as a comparable, then it shouldn't be used.
Maturin is a co-chair of the House Tax Policy Committee and highlighted the issue of deed restrictions during a tax policy hearing.
From this potential comparable has deed restrictions. Property will not be used for grocery store or supermarket, wholesale club, discount department store, pharmacy, any business whose principal residents are from the sale of alcoholic beverages, and then go further on to define, but not limited to, sale of dry refrigerated frozen groceries, meat, seafood, poultry, produce, delicatessen, bakery products, refrigerated frozen dairy products, grocery products. Well, I'm getting to that. Well, there's a little bit left. Selling a full line of hard and soft goods, clothing, cards, gifts, electronics, garden supplies, furniture, lawnmowers, toys, health, beauty aids, hardware items, bath accessories, and auto accessories, and it's good for 25 years. as a recognized appraiser, former member of the State Board of Real Estate Appraisers, do you think that's a good comparable to use for your relatively new, unencumbered store?
It's not a good comparable, no.
Okay. Would it surprise you that the ultimate use for that was light manufacturing?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Would it surprise you that that's been accepted by the tax tribunal as a perfectly good comparable for a relatively a couple-year-old big box store?
As I started my talk here, I think the current problem comes from bad comps, bad rulings, and the MTT stuck on a certain mentality.
Unlike Indiana's legislation, Maturin's bill will not reverse decisions that have already been made. But Representative John Kivela still feels it is important to get the bill signed into law as soon as possible, because smaller chains like auto parts stores and restaurants are seeking similar tax reductions.
You know, I remind people that this started with big box stores. And if people think it's going to end there, they're fooling themselves.
However, a Michigan Court of Appeals decision in May indicates the tide may be turning. The appeals court ruled the Michigan Tax Tribunal's decision regarding the cash value of this Menards store in Escanaba was not supported by competent material and substantial evidence. The case has been remanded back to the tribunal with instructions to use the correct legal principles in determining the true cash value of the store. The appeals court ruling was cause for celebration among local leaders and Bright store owners in Escanaba.
Well, it has been a long battle for many of us, and without the collaboration and cooperation of everybody in the UP, because Marquette has been battling this, Brady Township is battling this, City of Escanaba is battling, and it's coming down the pipe much more. And unfortunately, it was always viewed as a UP problem, but it's a problem of the state of Michigan.
What you have here is also consistent with the tribunal's constitutional role.
Jack Vancouvering, who served as legal counsel for several Upper Michigan townships, credits the tenacity of UP leaders and citizens for progress on the dark store issue.
You have county commissioners and city council people that demand their voice be heard. They have single-handedly turned the rest of the state around. You know, a dozen people in the UP speaking out made a big difference. And I think that if you don't do anything, nothing changes.
The next hurdle for all communities in the state will come when the Senate votes on its version of House Bill 5578. And while it has a lot of momentum coming from the House, Senator Casperson does expect some resistance in the Senate.
Because I do believe some folks like it the way it is, those that benefit from it, and would like to see it stay status quo. But I just see that being a slippery slope, and I see no end in sight if we don't deal with this.
And other states like Alabama will be watching closely. Since 2013, Lowe's has filed nearly 80 appeals in 20 counties. If you would like more information about this issue, you can go to Boxedin.news or contact your local township office. You can also contact the office of your state senator to let them know your thoughts on this issue.